Peter Eckrich. Hang on.
This is what the Patreon people get.
This is...
Okay.
Welcome to Outtakes.
Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from listeners like you who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/IHearOfSherlock and at ihearofsherlock.substack.com. And by Dan Andriakos, Sebastian McCabe, Jeff Cody Mystery Series. The latest, Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, starts with an arrow through the heart on Valentine's Day. Now available in paperback or as ebooks from MX Books and Amazon. And now you can enjoy some iHo's swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers. Available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 328, On the Shoulders of Giants.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Walder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Walder.
Thank you, Mr. Bill Curtis. It is always a pleasure to be here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Walder.
And Bert, I feel like I am a giant standing on your shoulders every day.
I wondered what that pain was. You know, you should take your golf shoes off.
You are not the first one to call me a pain in the neck. Or other
and
places.
I won't be the last.
No, you will not. You will not. Well, hopefully our listeners don't feel that way. We got a great show lined up today. We're going to be speaking with Rob Nunn and Peter Eckrich about their latest book, the third in their series. It's a natural progression, and we think it's one that every Sherlockian ought to pick up. So you'll want to hear more about that soon. We also have some notes about events coming up. We have the latest film review from our film reviewer, Christian Monggaard, and, of course, Canonical Couplet, a Sherlock Holmes quiz, where we give you 2 lines of poetry and ask you to discern which Sherlock Holmes story we're talking about, and we have a prize for the randomly selected winner. And this episode's prize will be a copy of On the Shoulders of Giants. So if you like what Peter and Rob have to say about their book, then you want to participate in the quiz, see if you can win a copy. And if you don't win, you can still go out and purchase the book. That's the beauty of it. Really is. Just a quick note, housekeeping here. If you would like to subscribe to us, you can do that on any podcast platform, even on YouTube. We're on all the majors, Apple, Spotify, etc. So we try to make it convenient for you. You can even ask your connected device to play the latest episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And of course, you can subscribe to us on Patreon or on Substack. Both of those ways give you the show ad-free, but it also gives you a chance to get bonus content from time to time, where we provide exclusives just for our supporters on Patreon and Substack. Check those out at the links in the show notes, or just go to patreon.com/IHearOfSherlock, or ihearofsherlock.substack.com. We thank you in advance for your support. And of course, if you'd like to email us, you can shout us out at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Well, it is always a pleasure to get together with other Sherlockians. That is part of what makes this hobby go around. And the Learned Societies helps us learn exactly where we can do that sort of thing. The last time we were here, we left you off in the middle of April of 2026. So, Bert, where do we pick up?
Bound Brook, New Jersey, April 16, my local scion. The Red-Headed League of Jersey is having a dinner meeting in Bound Brook, New Jersey, and our pal Bruce Harris has all the information. And there's also a Facebook group called RH League NJ you can take a look at on April 16.
Superb. And if you happen to be a little farther south on April 16th, you can have dinner with the Handsome Wheels in Columbia, South Carolina. Find more about them at handsomewheels.com. That's HANSOM wheels.com.
Those Wheels people are so handsome.
They are.
On the 17th, in St. Charles, Missouri, the Harpooners of the Sea Unicorn are having a meeting. Jonathan Basford is the contact, and you can look at their website at harpooners.wordpress.com.
And get your virtual selves ready for the Norwegian Explorers on April 18th. They are hosting a virtual study group, and you can find out more at norwegianexplorers.org.
And also on the 18th, Sherlock Monthly with our friend Edward G. Pettit at the Rosenbach Museum is having a virtual meeting, and he can tell you more. It's April 18.
If you happen to be in Madison, Wisconsin, the very next day, April 19th, the notorious Canary Trainers are meeting. Joanna Draper Carlson is running that, and you can find out more at comicsworthreading.com/Canary Trainers.
And it's Watson's Tin Box on April 20th in Columbia, Maryland. Watson's Tin Box of Ellicott City is having a dinner meeting. Matt Hall is the contact, our friend, the recently invested Matt Hall. And you can check out their website at watsonstinbox.org.
As you probably know, one of the first things that Sherlock Holmes said to Dr. Watson was, "You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive." Well, the Afghanistan Perceivers are meeting on the 23rd of April virtually. You can find out more about them at tulsa-sherlock.org.
And in Bethesda, Maryland, April 24th through 26th, it's Malice Domestic 38. And you can find out much more about them at Malice Domestic, all one word, ORG.
They're looking great for 38. I wouldn't have put them over 30. I mean, man. No malice intended.
No.
Well, on April 25th, the Saturday afternoon, right here in Detroit, Michigan, you can join the Amateur Mendicant Society of Detroit for our 80th anniversary dinner meeting. It's being held at Cliff Bell's, which is the very site of the first meeting on April 26th, 1946. If you would like to learn more, check us out at amateurmendicantsociety.com.
Yeah, we hope to see you there. I'm hopeful that I'm going to be there, too. It'll be a lot of
that's
fun.
great. I know we have a lot of out-of-towners who are coming in to experience this, so I better get my act in gear.
Yeah. And also on the 25th, all the way south, Winter Garden, Florida, the Orange County Pips of Orlando are getting together for breakfast. Our friend Eric Deckers is going to be passing out the maple syrup and ordering the bacon, and you can find out more at meetup.com/orange-county-pips, the Orange County Pips of Orlando. And I should just point out that on February 28th, I'm going to be I'm going to be part of and giving a talk about the British Empire and the world of Sherlock Holmes. with the Bootmakers of Toronto. So you can find out more from their website.
Oh, that is superb. I will check that out. And one more, I think we ought to at least talk up right now, because I don't think we want to wait until we get to this cadence in the show. It's a big conference coming up in the Chicago area.
Oh, right.
In October, called And It Is Always 1895. It's a celebration of the life of Vincent Starrett. It's going to be 140 years old this year. Goodness gracious. It looks like there are activities over the course of 3 days there in Chicago from October 23rd through 25th. So you want to check out anditisAlways1895.org. We'll have a link to that in the show notes, as well as to the Sherlockian calendar. And in conjunction with that, there's a new book coming out about Vincent Starrett. Our friend Ray Betzner, who runs the Studies in Starrett website, has announced Bookfellows, The Private Lives of Vincent Starrett and Sherlock Holmes. It's going to be published by the Wessex Press under their Gassagine Books imprint. And I think it'll be released in conjunction with the conference. So a lot of great Starrett stuff coming up this year. And of course, if you have any events that you would like to see added to the Sherlockian calendar, please get in touch with Ron Fish. You can find the calendar at sherlockiancalendar.com. Peter Eckrich is the co-editor of the Finest Assorted Collection and Canonical Cornerstones with Rob Nunn. He started attending Sherlockian functions as a child thanks to his father, Joe. When he's not hanging out in bookshops, he's a fourth-grade teacher at Edgar Road Elementary in Webster Groves, Missouri. He enjoys spending time with his wife, Jenny, and daughter, Harper, in St. Louis. Harper has started a mission to see all the presidential homes. He's a collector himself of books, autographs, and other things he can spend his money on. He's a member of the Parallel Case of St. Louis, the Illustrious Clients, the Tankerville Club, the 140 Varieties, and the Occupants of the Empty House. He's written for the Sherlock Holmes Review and has been published in the Irregular Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Rob Nunn is the Gassagine of the Parallel Case of St. Louis and headlight of the Beacon Society, and chair of the committee of the 2026 Holmes in the Heartland Weekend. He's co-editor of the Finest Assorted Collection and Canonical Cornerstones with Peter, the Monstrum Opus of Sherlock Holmes with Brad Kefauver, and Holmes in the Heartland with Joe Eckrich. He's the author of The Criminal Mastermind of Baker Street and 2 volumes of the Commonplace book. His articles have appeared in the Baker Street Journal, Canadian Holmes, the Sherlock Holmes Journal, and other publications. Rob is a 5th-grade teacher in Edwardsville, Illinois, where he lives with his wife and daughter. Peter Eckrich and Rob Nunn, welcome back to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Happy to be here.
Well, as we look at the archives here, it looks like you guys were last on the show in season 18, so a couple of years ago. It was episode 283. We talked with you about canonical cornerstones. And prior to that, it was episode 244 in season 16, talking about the Finest Assorted Collection. So it looks like we're with you every other year or so. That's a good cadence, right?
It's about how fast we can put the books out.
Yeah. And about as much I-hose as you can take in between. Well, I'm glad we've got you in recovery mode now, so we can talk to you about your latest book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Great Sherlockians Remembered. Now, before we get into the meat of the subject here, I don't know if this is potatoes or if this is the vegetables, but there's a quote that I've seen as Gassagine Books and our friends at Wessex Press have been promoting, and it's on the back cover there. There's a quote that's all Sherlockians are interesting. I'm curious about where that quote came from and why you guys chose it.
I feel like it's a Peter Blau quote I heard somewhere along the lines. And, if he hasn't said it in the past, I'm sure he'll say it in the future.
He'll take credit for it eventually. That's good.
As well he should.
Well, and I think it's an apt quote because, I mean, look, we're in the business here in interviewing Sherlockians, and I think that quote holds true. We have yet to find an uninteresting person on the show other than Bert's co-host.
No, other than me.
No.
Other than me.
But that's the thing. Every Sherlockian we run into has a different approach, a different take on things, has come up in a different way. We're all unique in that. And as you think about some of the greats who have gone before, and as you concepted this book, I mean, where did it come from, and why did you want to pick certain people to retread or to maybe introduce people to who weren't familiar with them?
Well, we were discussing ideas after the last book. So usually how this process works is Rob will not allow me to talk to him about another book until like 6 months have passed. And so we meet for lunch and we start throwing out ideas, and we come up with a list, and we were like, what about a book on Sherlockians? What about essays on Sherlockians? And then we just started going through the process of, well, what would it look like?
Yeah, it's one of those things where we kind of throw around a bunch of ideas and, what about this? What about this? And then you narrow it down. And we just kept coming back to, Peter and I love just going to events and the time that we get to spend with the people in this hobby. So why not, lionize some of the people that have really paved the way for us to do the things that we get to do in Sherlockian.
So when we think about the progression of your books, this is now the third book that you've done together. And we mentioned the other two, The Finest Assorted Collection, which was a collection of essays on collecting Sherlock Holmes. And then the second one was Canonical Cornerstones. And this is helping people kind of understand what the foundations are for building a Sherlockian library. So you've got collecting, you've got building your library, and it seems like this is the next logical step in that progression where now you're talking about the people who would have written some of those essays or would have perhaps even written some of those books that are part of the library, or certainly who would have been collecting those books as part of their library. So it seems to me like it's a kind of a natural next step for you.
Yeah, and when we look at ideas, it's always, we don't want to, we're pretty niche in Sherlockiana as it is, but we didn't want to make it so niche that people would look at a topic and say, oh, that's not something I need to know about, or I already know all of that stuff. We try to think of what would a newer Sherlockian appreciate, and then what would a longtime Sherlockian also appreciate. So that, the books and especially these biographies that we have here, we definitely wanted to make sure there was something for everybody in this.
So you've got, in the table of contents here, just casting my eye down it, it looks like you have about 22 people that you selected. Is that right? And if so, how big was your original list? Is this pared down from like 50 people, or how did you get here?
Yes, we had quite a large list. So we sent out some messages to fellow Sherlockians, and besides, lists that we both came up with, and started asking for names. And you would think that it would be an easy task, right, to come up with names. But it's not, because you come up with so many names. You come up with so many people. And then the real work came in. How do we narrow it down?
So how did you narrow it down?
I'm glad you asked that question.
Man, that was
off the top of my head.
That was quite a negotiation session between Peter and I. It was, kind of like, okay, I'll do this one if you give me this one. I mean, there were some definite shoo-ins. Obviously, Christopher Morley and Edgar W. Smith. They they're first round draft picks.
Exactly.
But then there were some others where we got thinking, well, what about somebody like Tom Sticks or along that line? But then we realized there's also full book length biographies out about some people. So that kind of helped us open up some slots where, Michael Whalen just had a biography come out about him a year or two ago. What is a 6 or 7 page biography in this anthology going to be able to add to that? So we purposely decided up front, if somebody already has a book about them, then, we're going to use that slot for somebody else. And we laid the groundwork real early that they had to be American, because Peter and I don't even know what we don't know about the worldwide Sherlockians. And they had to have already passed on. So we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So if you're not in the book, congratulations, you're still alive.
Oh. We also looked at, the country. We didn't want everyone just from one section of the country. We wanted a variety of people from different parts. We wanted a variety of people from different time periods.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you two did a real lot of thoughtful work in putting this together. Because, it's almost like a puzzle, isn't it? Where you've got your corner pieces, right? That's Edgar Smith and Christopher Morley and Vincent Sterrett and Jim Montgomery, right? So those are four great corner pieces of your puzzle. But then the rest, the mind wanders as to how you could actually fill this in. So what were some of the must-haves in addition to what you just described in terms of the country or different representations? What were you looking for specifically to make sure you wanted to get some folks in here?
Well, we definitely wanted it to not just be a bunch of men from the 30s and 40s, which
good call.
Notably are very important in Sherlockiana, but we didn't want 21 biographies of the same style of person who appreciated Sherlock Holmes the same way during the same time period. So we looked for, people who have passed more recently that have had a major impact. We tried to go mostly in a somewhat chronological order, and it feels weird to have these chapters on John Lellenberg and Susan Rice, people that, were just around a few years ago and, have had major contributions to Sherlockiana within the past 10, 20 years, maybe 30 years, in the same book as, Ben Abramson, who started the Baker Street Journal. But so that was a major point too. We wanted to make sure we weren't just looking so far back into the past. We wanted to have some also people within recent memory.
And we wanted people who helped spread Sherlock Holmes, people who inspired others to join groups, and not necessarily just people who published works, but people who were active in the hobby, promoted it, inspired.
When we put out a call, through emails or on Facebook groups and things like that, it was so interesting to get people's feedback, because they would give us names and it's like, oh, that's somebody. Peter and I are from the Midwest, so the name Gordon Speck is a name that, Peter knew Gordon growing up, and I got to meet him once or twice before he passed. So that's like, oh, that's a good name. But then people would put their rationale behind it, and you would realize just how important all of the interpersonal connections were when people were welcoming and outgoing to Sherlockians. And it's not, like Peter said, it's not just people who wrote big books or started societies. It was, they were a benefit to everybody who got to spend time with them.
And they're such interesting people. It goes back to that quote on the back of the book and what we talked about earlier. it wasn't just their Sherlock Holmes hobbies that made them interesting. They had careers. They had other hobbies themselves. It was fascinating.
Yeah. Rich Krishunas writes the chapter on Edgar W. Smith, and he sent us all the stuff that he didn't use, even after we cut his. I mean, Rich loves to research, and he wrote a great piece, and we had to tell him, Rich, we only have so many pages in the book. So then he sent us all the other stuff he found interesting. And man, to just look at, Edgar W. Smith's days in the automotive industry would be enough to fill its own book.
I feel that deeply. Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
So how did you go about selecting, obviously, we just talked to you about how you selected the subjects, but how did you go about selecting the authors who would write about each one of these? I mean, some of them are obvious, like Ray Betzner and Vincent Starrett, right? He's the widely accepted expert on Vincent Starrett. That's a no-brainer. But say with Rich, for example, why would he get assigned Edgar W. Smith? Or, pick your essay and your author and give us an understanding.
There were some people that we knew we wanted to work with them as an author, like Sonia Featherston. I think she's been in all three of our books, and just first of all, a lovely person to work with, top to bottom, but such a great writer. So sometimes we came at it that way, where we have this author and we need to find the subject for them to work with. Or other times it was, we had a subject like the Vincent Starrett one, and we needed to find some, and there was already the shoe-in, but also we wanted to kind of bring some new voices in. So Matt Hall writes about John Bennett Shaw. Sorry about that. Yeah, John Bennett Shaw, and there's not any lifelong connection there or anything. We just thought, well, let's put an interesting subject with an interesting author, and it's so great to just see a new take on a fairly familiar story from people.
And we were also looking for personal connections. Like Curtis Armstrong writes about Susan Rice, and you can just feel, the love he had for her come through, the impact she had on him. Joe Eckrich writes about Gordon Speck. They were really good friends for a very long time.
Was there any subject, any one you were thinking about that just eluded you? I mean, the reason I ask is you were just talking about Rich and Edgar. And, John Lellenberg, who is also written about in this book, labored for a while on a biography of Edgar and, never really sort of moved it to conclusion for a variety of reasons. But I'm wondering if there was anybody that was on your list that, despite all the great research, nothing really interesting other than some basic biographical information came up. Or did that not happen? That would be interesting, too.
There are two subjects in here that there's not as much known about them. So Tamar Zephyrin writes about Catherine McMahon, the first one of the women who solved the crossword puzzle for the original BSI membership. And, she was having, and thank God she's an archivist herself, but she had a really tough time finding new things. And we wanted to include pictures of all of our subjects if possible. And I think we were maybe 3 days out from final submission, and we still didn't have a picture of Catherine McMahon. So that one was a tough one. And Vincent Wright writes about Helen Elizabeth Wilson, possibly one of the very first people to ever write about Sherlock Holmes, and definitely the very first person we know of now to be some type of chronologist. And Vincent has just done amazing research with her, but he'll admit freely, he's like, there's still a ton of stuff I don't know, and I don't even know if it's out there anywhere for me to find.
And yet in the end, with Catherine McMahon, you have not only one, but two pictures of her.
They came together at the wire.
That's amazing. So there's one of her as a young lady, probably back from around the time that she sent in her winning entry in the Saturday Review of Literature Sherlock Holmes crossword puzzle. And then there's another one more recently following her investiture into the BSI as one of the first women to receive a shilling. And it's just a lovely bookend, a lovely way to do it.
Yeah, hers was such a sweet story. I loved what Tamar was able to put together with that.
It's interesting. We should tell our listeners that, some of these people, you've done a great job with the focus on geography around the country and, older people, chronologically speaking, as well as newer people like Susan and John and so on. But we should tell people that we've got a sketch here of the life of Helen Elizabeth Wilson, which, as you say, was written by Vincent W. Wright. And Helen Wilson is a woman whose first work was The Life of Sherlock Holmes, but she was writing in September of 1898, before The Return and much else were even thought of, much less published. So you've really got, quite an interesting selection here of these giants. And also great subjects. I mean, nobody is going to be able to find out, I think, anything more about Helen Elizabeth Wilson than you've got here. It's great.
Well, I don't think that'll stop Vincent Wright from still looking. He is tenacious with that type of stuff.
He is. Now, go ahead.
What about Volume 2 on Edgar? What about more on Edgar? Where's on a website, maybe?
We
You'll
saw
have to have
Rich's
Rich on the
notes.
show.
There is enough.
Yeah, John Lellenberg actually used to have a lot of that information up on his BSI archival history website. And since his passing, that was taken down, so it's no longer available to everyone. So this is to me, On the Shoulders of Giants, just for the Edgar fans alone, is a wonderful treasure. But, I mean, boy, you talk about putting together in one place information that's just dissipated across the web or across microfiche or simply has evaporated due to memories being gone, people passing away that knew these people. So I'm curious, as you think through this list of almost 24 people, obviously we know there were personal connections to some of the more recent passings, Susan and John and whatnot, Gordon certainly. Boy, and I should say, I still remember that iron-like grip of a handshake that Gordon had every time he met him. And he was just full of vitality and joy. And, that doesn't always come through on the page. So having these personal memories matters. But help me understand, who is let's say, the most distant Sherlockian, historically speaking, for which we still had a living connection that could tell their story?
Well, Ely Liebau has a chapter in here, and written by Ray, and Ray talks about how they used to, he'd meet him together, they'd get together at the bar on a BSI weekend, and his is titled "You Remind Me of a Story," which was a thing that Ely would always say. That may be the furthest one back.
It might be.
Yeah, with that personal connection, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm horrified to admit that I actually hung out with Ely, it was like an after party at a suite at the Iroquois back before it was renovated. So we're talking about the mid-'90s or so.
I don't know which one makes you sound older, that or your reference to microfiche a minute ago.
Man, I'm turning into dust as we speak. We're going to pause here for just a moment as I go searching for the Fountain of Youth, and we have a word from our sponsor.
Sherlockian, magician, mystery writer, professor, and sleuth at large. That's Sebastian McCabe. In a series of lighthearted mysteries by Dan Andriacco, Mac calls on his knowledge of the great detective to solve conundrums in his small town of Erin, Ohio. These adventures are shared and chronicled by Mac's brother-in-law, Jeff Cody, an admiring but by no means uncritical Watson. Readers say the cast of continuing characters, including Jeff's journalist-turned-novelist wife Linda, makes each new book feel like a visit home again. The McCabe and Cody mysteries are packed with Easter eggs for Sherlockians, but they also feature engaging characters, good writing, solid plotting, and a light touch. As Bonnie McBird said, "You're in the hands of a master of mystery plotting here." David Markham calls the series classic Golden Age mysteries set now. The latest in the series, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, starts with an arrow through the heart on Valentine's Day, and that's not even the main mystery. Dan Andriacco's McCabe and Cody mysteries are available in paperback or as ebooks from MX Books and Amazon.
So what's something about these folks that, I mean, look, many of them are quote unquote household names in the Sherlockian world, but what's something about one or two of the stories and the essays that you got that really took you off guard, that surprised you?
Surprised us. What surprised us, Rob?
For me, I always knew, Edith Meiser was very important in the radio realm and very important in popularizing the Sherlock Holmes stories here in America. And I knew that Anthony Boucher was connected with that as well. But I didn't realize how closely those two lives kind of dovetailed one another. It's almost like Erica Dowell did the first half of that accomplishment, and then Boucher came in and carried the torch for the second leg of the race. So for me, I think it was how closely those two paths crossed.
Speak on a personal note is that I was lucky enough to know some of the people in this book, Paul Herbert, Gordon Speck, and, met them numerous times. I was surprised by how much I did not know. I was surprised by how many people I did not really know that made such an impact. So this was a learning thing for myself as well.
So another one for me, Dan Stashauer was nice enough to write the foreword for us. And somewhere in there, he says Sherlock Holmes would be appalled by how much the word, quote unquote, how much the word love appears in these pages. But there's so much love and fun in all of these biographies. When people hear, "Oh, you like Sherlock Holmes, you're in a literary society," they probably think of us as like some stodgy, tweed wearing, elbow patch, cigar smoking guys sitting around a room. And, like, that doesn't sound terrible, but there's so much fun invested with being a Sherlockian. And that all comes from the time we spend with other Sherlockians. And I hope that comes through in this book, that everybody, whether they knew them or not, all of these biographies come through with a lot of reverence, but also appreciation for how much fun their subjects were having as they did this.
Now, I know you squarely laid out the qualification for inclusion in this book as having to be dead. But and I'm not asking like who's on your hit list for the next book. I don't want to endanger anyone.
Unfortunately, Scott, we didn't want to tell you, but
you're chapter 1.
Great. Man, I better get to work.
I just would like to say we'll never forget you.
Who? What?
Who? What?
But actually, that leads to the question I had, because you noted, particularly with Catherine McMahon and perhaps with others, the difficulty in finding material about them. So for those people who are thinking about a legacy, or thinking about what they bring to the group, how would you, it's going to sound kind of macabre, but how would you help people prepare for that eventuality? So in other words, for the researcher, say 50 years hence, if they're researching something about current Sherlockians, and I'm thinking about how much of our communication these days is electronic, how would you consider someone having material enough or a legacy enough to be worthy of being remembered in a future state of a book like this?
I don't think it's really on the person to make sure that they have a legacy worth remembering. I think it's on all of us to spend the time talking to people, getting to know people, enjoying their company, which we do a lot, right? We do it every time we get together. The conversations always start with Sherlock Holmes, but it always end up somewhere else. But, taking that time to get to know people, taking that time to reach out to people. The Sherlockians are, in my experience, are people that are willing to spend time. It doesn't matter how much you come in knowing. They're willing to spend time helping you, teaching you, guiding you.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Peter said, it's really just make those connections, get out there and meet new people and build friendships, because there's plenty of hard data that, people were able to mine for this book. Like, oh, I found this publication that they wrote, or this letter that was saved in the BSI archives, or things like that. But also so many pieces of information came from memories that were shared with our authors. So I think not only for our own mental health and the livelihood of Sherlockiana, it's important to make those connections. But, if you want to be macabre like Scott is, that we can just think, well, someday maybe somebody will remember me and say nice things about me.
Well, you're right. It is very important that, and I think you say it well, take the time to get to know people. There are always irregulars. We sit at the dinner every year for the sadder and sadder Stand With Me by the Terrace. And by sadder and sadder, I mean the number of people that I knew well seemed to be populating that list more often, which is depressing, at least to me. But there are always irregulars, where we will find out that a year or a year and a half before they passed away, and nobody knew. And in fact, there are some names, there are occasionally people who come into this orbit and who disappear after a while, and we don't know nothing about them at all. And part of being clubbable and part of being a member of a group like the Baker Street Irregulars is paying attention to the other people around the table at the dinner and, find out, being curious and finding out what's going on with them and making connections.
Yeah, I mean, this is like you said, clubbable, and it's all about being personable and generous with your time, but also generous with your listening, because the people that you're sitting around, whether it's a Scion meeting or a Zoom meeting or a table in New York, wherever it is, those people are there because they are just as invested in Sherlock Holmes as you are. So there's your starting point. And man, if you give a friendship time to blossom, you'll be amazed at the wonderful people that are in this hobby.
Yeah, this is not my quote, but I'm not sure who said it, but people come for the Sherlock Holmes, they stay for the friends.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned having known a few of these people, not the majority of them, though. Thinking about this whole list, these giants of the Sherlockian world, whom you didn't meet, if you had to pick one from all of these essays, after what you've gotten to know about them, thanks to the authors of the various chapters, who's the one Sherlockian on this list that you would have wanted to meet and spend some extended time with?
Man, I don't remember the questions being this tough last time, Rob.
Hey, it's your subject matter, man.
I mean, can we start getting these in advance?
Well, it doesn't have to be just one. I mean, who stands out? You know?
Yeah, pick a handful if you want.
For me, William Baring Gould, that guy just seemed to he would just get into a subject and just dig his teeth into it. Phil Burgum wrote about him, and just to me, Bill Baring Gould is always been, look at me calling him Bill like we're old friends. William Baring Gould has always just been that name that was on the annotated. It's always, the Baring Gould annotated. But then reading Phil's biography of him really brought this guy to life, and how his wife carried on his legacy to make sure his books were published after he passed. He just seems like somebody that you could just sit in a couple armchairs with in a hotel lobby and just listen to that guy talk for a long time.
Yeah, I'm gonna narrow it down to two. It would either be Christopher Morley or Ben Averson, because I love talking to book collectors and people who have been in the book business, and I just think it would be a wonderful conversation. And I'm a big fan of Morley, and I think I could totally be in that lunch club.
That's great. And those are excellent choices. All of those. Bert, what about you? You actually have a chapter in this, we should mention.
I do. I got to write about Jim Montgomery. Although I don't remember how I got that assignment, or if I thought it up, or if you thought it up, or if nobody thought it up.
Well, I think they saw his nickname was Monty and automatically assigned him to you.
To you? Oh,
yeah.
Me. That's
how you
good.
got stuck with me.
That's the way our brains work.
No. How did I get aligned with Montgomery? Do you remember?
I'm wondering.
I think it was your personality.
You're so musical.
Yes.
Well, you do have the musical background. And I wonder, I don't remember the timeline, but you guys did a Trifles episode on James Montgomery, correct?
No, we did a Legends of the BSJ episode on iHose on Jim Montgomery.
Right.
That could have been it.
Right.
But I don't remember which one came first, the chicken or the egg, but it could have been tied to that. Or, I mean, Bert is also one of those people where we said, hey, maybe we can get Bert Wolder to slum it and work with us for a project.
Oh, happy to do it. Happy to do it. Well, I didn't know anything really about Montgomery, but I was delighted with the assignment and delighted to learn what I learned about him. It turned out that, like so many of these people, that he was accomplished, magnetic, sounded like an enormous amount of fun, made great contributions about which I knew nothing. My earliest connection to Jim Montgomery was back in my first BSI dinner. In those days, Julian, the dinner was at the Regency Hotel in New York, and Julian Wolfe was still leading the Baker Street Irregulars, and at each one of the meetings, Julian had a record player and would play the songs of Jim Montgomery, always introducing them by describing them as the songs that made Bertie Edwards weep. Now, of course, when I was at this dinner, my first dinner, I was in college, and to give you an idea of how long ago that was, Nixon was the president when I was trudging through the snow to get to the Regency. And like most things, I was completely clueless, really. I mean, it was thanks to Steve Clarkson and Andy Page and in those days, the local Scion, which was a precursor of the Priory School, that I was invited to the dinner at all. But Julian would play the records, and I must say that because I was completely clueless at the time, it was like I was listening to an Edison wax cylinder. I just could not fathom why the group was playing this music, but clearly it meant something to them. And I'll tell you more about the music in a second. But anyway, I found out that about his history, about his college days. He was at a very famous club, the Triangle Club in Princeton, a glee club that traveled the world. He decided after a year and a half in finance to throw that over and become a professional opera singer. He made great contributions to the Sherlockian world. He sort of fell into it through the Speckled Band, oddly enough, and wound up revitalizing Sherlockian publication after the Baker Street Journal died, and among other things, discovered the manuscript of the Crown Diamond, and then wrote these songs, which were a big feature of the BSI dinners in the early 50s and in the late 40s. And I was surprised that he was only a part of the organization in the orbit of the BSI for about 10 years before he passed away. But he struck me as quite a joyous and happy man when he was in a regular company. And I was delighted to get to know him.
Now, you said the Speckled Band. Did you mean the Sons of the Copper Beeches?
No, I meant the Speckled Band, because he was somehow fell into a correspondence with
Ketty?
Yeah, with Ketty, and I don't remember if it's Pear or Feast. Ketty Sr. or Ketty Jr.
Ketty Sr. passed away in 43, so I'm thinking it's Jr.
Yeah, so it's after that, right? So it is Ketty Jr. And it was Ketty who connected him to Edgar. What had happened was in 1930, when they published the memorial edition of the complete Sherlock Holmes, he sort of reread the canon and learned about the Baker Street Irregulars. But he didn't learn about the Irregulars until that other story in the 40s was published, The Case of the Man Who Was Wanted. And so he began corresponding with Ketty Jr. in Boston somehow. And it was Ketty Jr. who passed his name on to Edgar Smith and had him invited to his first dinner.
How do you like that?
And all of that within 10 years.
Yeah. And then in terms of his music, he issued, I think in 1950, a series of 78 RPMs of his songs. What he would do, since he was an accomplished tenor singer, he gave a report at one BSI dinner that he'd been to London and seen the Scotland Yard Black Museum. And there, he said, I found Holmes's gramophone, the one that's in the Mazarin Stone. And I found, even more importantly, a record by Irene Adler. And he recreated the sound of the Irene Adler record, but he said that there was a problem with Holmes's gramophone. And so as it made a circle, he sang this particular group of notes one step down rather than up. So it sounded awful. And so he would sing this, and people found it incredibly amusing. And then he would go on and sing some of these great Irish songs that are of that era with Bertie Edwards in The Valley of Fear. And then he wrote 2 Sherlockian songs himself. But it's thanks to Erica Dowling at the Lilly Library that, amazingly, we now have, actually, that music available to us. And Erica's just done a wonderful job, Erica Dowell. And it's wonderful to hear his voice again.
Listening to Bert talk all about this takes me back to when we got his first. I mean, it was almost his final draft because he's such a good writer. But it's interesting when we do these anthologies. We have so many different authors, and their voices shine through in such different ways. You know, we talk about Vincent Wright is just like this bloodhound tracking down historical information on things, and you can just almost feel his breathless intensity as he discovers new facts. And then when Bert writes, he has just a lovely conversational tone. Like, you know, for anybody who's ever listened to iHose, you can just hear that voice coming off the page. And I love working with different authors because, you know, every 7, 8, 9 pages, it's a completely new voice telling a completely different story that all have a through line like that, where everybody loves what they're doing.
Bert, don't let this go to your head. You're not getting a raise.
Drat.
No, it almost sounds like you should be in the communications field.
No.
You guys ever think of starting a podcast?
No, I'm too shy. Everybody knows that.
No, but you raise a good point, Rob, and I think what you and Peter together have done through your editorial skills and your discernment as you start out on these projects is you've managed to really collect a chorus of Sherlockian voices that are all different and yet they harmonize. It provides an experience for everyone that gives us a glimpse of these great individuals, these Sherlockians, through so many different lenses. And that's something I don't think we could get otherwise. Even if we picked apart the archival material ourselves, to be able to tell a story about something, to be able to bring it together, to relate how someone made you feel or the wonder of discovering something about them. You're going to get that in various different ways as you put this together. So kudos to both of you.
It is such a pleasure working with so many different authors because everybody comes at it so differently, but everybody just brings their A game. I don't know if we've ever had a contribution where we're just like, I don't know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. Everybody just comes in with their heart on their sleeve, and it's so great to work with passionate authors.
It's great when you can surround yourself with talented people.
Which is why we're on this podcast.
Oh, well, you guys make this a great show. Well, we're just the vehicle for getting the story out to other people. So I have to ask, and I kind of know the answer already, but I'm going to ask anyway. As you guys think about your lunch together, what's the next project going to be? You've already got a number of things you eliminated for this time around. Are you going back to that same bucket and maybe picking up on something that you cast aside last time?
Yes, Rob, what is our next project?
God, you're killing me, Scott Monty.
I mean, we could have an exclusive here for everybody. Think of that.
Spring break's coming up. We can meet for lunch.
Oh, God, you people are killing me. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
It'll be something, though, right? I mean, you guys aren't sick of each other yet, are you?
No, Peter is an absolute joy to work with. He should be the one answering this question because Peter is the idea machine behind this, and I'm the one that kind of comes in and makes sure all the cracks are filled. Peter gets to do all the fun broad strokes, and I'm like, okay, we need a comma here in between these two words. So,
well, Rob is very good at editing. He's an excellent person to work with.
Well, you guys sound like a great match. I mean, Peter, you're the big ideas guy, and Rob does crack. So, I mean, fills in the cracks. That's what I mean. No, but I mean, you guys are a wonderful complement to each other, and I think you hold each other up really well. And we saw it from the very first book that you put out, and you've only proven yourselves time and again. So I think on behalf of all of our listeners and all the readers of your books, we look forward to whatever it is that comes out of the creative factory that you've put together here, and we'll look forward to it.
Well, thank you very much for that. And
thanks so much.
Thank you to Gasagine for all their hard work on the books as well.
Excellent. Well, any last words before we bid you adieu?
Thanks for having us on. It's always a pleasure.
All right. You got it. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks. You.
This is a terrific contribution to the history of the Baker Street Irregulars and really to irregulars everywhere. There are so many organizations, literary societies, and so on, whose knowledge of their founders and their most influential people is minimal. at best. But, thanks to this book and thanks to everything else that Peter and Rob have done, canonical cornerstones as an example, it's a wonderful resource. And, it's a great discovery. And I was honored to be able to contribute something to it. And I was just delighted to learn what I learned about Jim Montgomery. And it's nice to hear that that's a sort of a common through point for, the other people and the other subjects of these essays.
Yeah, and, as much as we do to keep green the memory of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, obviously, I don't think we give too much thought. There's some thought, but not too much thought as to how we keep green the memory of other Sherlockians. And certainly the BSI Oral History Project is a very specific thing to the BSI. But I think what we're seeing here, and certainly what you demonstrated, Bert, in your essay, as well as a number of the other ones in the book, is we're understanding where certain traditions came from or why we do things a certain way. You arrive at whatever timeline is right for you into this hobby. Maybe you've researched the organization. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you've read about some of these people. Maybe you haven't. And what this does is it kind of creates a grounding for anyone who wants to learn about why we do this and who some of the names behind it were and why they were important. So I think, as you say, it's a wonderful service to the hobby. As you know, we have introduced a new segment here on the show called Examining the Pictures. It's a film review, or other kind of media, by our friend Christian Monggaard. He's a film reviewer professionally and a podcaster, so he had a microphone. That's all we needed. And he is doing this series for us. And last time he talked all about young Sherlock Holmes. Well, this time it's approximately in that same era. What does he have in store? Well, listen along.
An unscrupulous rat striving for world domination while posing as a mouse, a peg-legged bat, a gigantic hound, a gigantic and very good-natured bloodhound called Toby, a missing toy maker and his little daughter, a certain very famous mouse detective and his loyal companion.
It's excitement!
Basil, look out!
And it's coming your way. It's the adventures of the Great Mouse Detective.
Yes, the animated The Great Mouse Detective from 1986 is most certainly an adventure to remember. My name is Christian Monggaard. Welcome to Examining the Pictures. Since the death of Walt Disney in 1966, the Disney studios, especially the animation department, had been struggling, trying to modernize while keeping the magic of the Disney films of old. New management, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, both joining the company in 1984, had a very confrontational style not to everyone's liking, but they did manage to resurrect the hand-drawn animated feature film department by making films that people wanted to see again. The Great Mouse Detective was one of the first really successful of the new films, and it was kind of an overture to the Disney Renaissance that came in the late 1980s and the first half of the 1990s with films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and, of course, The Lion King. The Great Mouse Detective takes place in 1897, the year of the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria. Walking the cold and rainy streets of London is Dr. David Q. Dawson, a medical mouse who has just returned from the war in Afghanistan and is looking for a place to stay. He meets a young Scottish girl, Olivia Flaversham, whose father, a toy maker, has been kidnapped by a sinister, peg-legged bat. Young Olivia is looking for Basil of Baker Street, the famous detective, in the hope that he can help her. Dawson gets her to Baker Street and they find Basil, who only agrees to help Olivia when he hears about the bat. The bat, whose name is Fidget, is a well-known associate of Basil's arch-enemy Professor Ratigan, a criminal mastermind and rat who does not like to be reminded that he is a rat. It turns out that Ratigan is forcing Olivia's father, the toy maker, to make a robot that looks and sounds like Queen Victoria and is under the control of Ratigan, who wants to rule the British Empire. It's quite the evil plan, but fortunately now Basil of Baker Street is on the case. This is a film that I saw the first time when I was a kid, 14 years of age, and it made quite the impression on me. It is fun, dramatic, exciting, and Basil, who lives in the cellar below 221B Baker Street, is just as brilliant as his great idol and sort of mentor, Sherlock Holmes. Actually, at one point in the film you hear Holmes, the real Sherlock Holmes, who is voiced by Basil Rathbone. The filmmakers borrowed his voice from an audio recording of the Red-Headed League from 1966.
I observe that there is a good deal of German music on the programme. It is introspective, and I want to introspect.
Alas, the voice of Watson is provided not by Nigel Bruce, but the actor Laurie Main. Basil gets his voice from British veteran actor Barry Ingham and Dawson from Val Bettin, who was an American actor, educated in England and with a very good English accent. It is a beautifully animated film with warm colors and so many spectacular set pieces. When Basil and Dawson are chasing Ratigan through London, or rather above a magical-looking London, in a primitive flying machine of sorts. Or when Ratigan himself, played to perfection by the wonderful Vincent Price with the silky smooth voice, which is also a little bit sinister, sings about his nefarious plans to his accomplices. Basil's home in Baker Street is precisely like you would imagine it to be. Comforting fire in the fireplace, cozy, mysterious chemical experiments in the corner, comfortable chairs to sit in, and of course Mrs. Judson, Basil's very kind housekeeper who brings them tea and crumpets. And the film and all its action is accompanied by the music of Henry Mancini, his first score for an animated feature film, but he also did do the music for the Pink Panther films with their funny animated title sequences. And the film is filled with references to the books of Dr. Watson, of course, and the real exploits of Holmes and Watson. It's a real pleasure to go hunting for those, you could call them Easter eggs, but at least those references. The Great Mouse Detective is based on the Basil of Baker Street books by the American children's author Eve Titus. She wrote 5 books about Basil and Dawson between 1958 and 1982, the first one being Basil of Baker Street. All of them illustrated by Paul Galdone. And yes, Titus's Basil is named after Basil Rathbone. From 2018 to 2020, another 3 Basil books were published, written by Kathy Hapka and illustrated by David Mottram. And a little bit of trivia. Eve Titus dedicates the first of the books to Adrian Conan Doyle, and I quote, "in the humble hope that this book for boys and girls will be a bridge to Mr. Sherlock Holmes himself." And on the cover of the first edition of the second book, Basil and the Lost Colony, a letter from Adrian Conan Doyle is printed in which he thanks Titus for the first book. "May I offer you my heartfelt congratulations," he writes. "It is a simply delightful creation, and I can assure you that my father would have reveled in every page of it. I may say that I am honored to have my name on the dedication page of a book which deserves complete success, not only with children, but with everybody who has a touch of youth still left in their hearts." Apart from the characters, almost nothing remains from Titus's first book in the film or any of the other books. The book tells the story about a colony of mice, a whole little city that Basil of Baker Street has helped establish in the cellar below Baker Street, and about his hunt for a couple of missing twins. But it's no wonder that the filmmakers loved the idea of Holmes being a mouse, the film being produced by Disney and Disney being the house that Mickey Mouse built. The story in The Great Mouse Detective, which is directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, and co-directed by Dave Michener and Bernie Mattinson, is the work of a whole bunch of people, including the two directors, or the two primary directors. And speaking of those two gentlemen, here's a little surprise for you. In 2017, I spoke to Ron Clements and John Musker when they were in Denmark promoting their latest animated Disney film, Moana. Musker and Clements have also directed Aladdin, Hercules, Treasure Planet and The Princess and the Frog for Disney, and they are true Disney veterans and very successful ones. What follows is an audio recording of the interview I did with them 9 years ago. I apologize for the poor quality of the recording. I started by asking them how the film came about, and it is Ron Clements who answers first. It was actually also him who had the idea for doing Sherlock Holmes as a mouse, or doing Basil of Baker Street. He's also the one, Ron Clements, who speaks the softest of the two men, and the two of them don't really mind interrupting each other, which perhaps can make it a bit difficult to hear at times. But here it is, 4 minutes with Ron Clements and John Musker. Thank you very much for listening. Talk to you again soon.
I was a Sherlock Holmes fanatic, it sounds like, as you were, and I read everything that Conan Doyle wrote as a teenager, particular time as a teenager. I read everything, and I made a little film, an animated film about Sherlock Holmes that actually helped me get into Disney when I went to get into Disney. And for whatever, I think there's something about Victorian England and Disney, to me, maybe it's...
Well, Disney was kind of an Anglophile, I think, so a lot of the Disney films have settings, even in London, Peter Pan, 101 Dalmatians.
While we were doing The Rescuers, was working on The Rescuers, actually, it was during that film, stumbled on the books by E. Titus in a bookstore, Basil of Baker Street. I thought, here's a way to do Sherlock Holmes in animation, but we were doing The Rescuers, which was sort of sat on that for a while. Yeah. But then a few years later, when they were looking for new ideas, pitched that idea of doing Basil of Baker Street, and
now with Benedict Cumberbatch and all this. It's like Sherlock, it's in the forefront. We were in the backwaters of Sherlockiania back then, but now he's center screen now. So.
It is a fairly crazy film, but I've heard that it was even crazier to begin with.
Oh yeah, that's a little. My version, yeah, because when I first was developing it, it was based on the books, but I want to take them into this kind of Monty Python direction a little bit. So we had in our version, instead of playing...
earlier version.
Yeah, he didn't play the violin, he played the tuba. And John Cleese was sort of more the model for Basil, and much more extreme, and kind of broke the fourth wall more, and Ron Miller, who was the producer at that time, said, whoa, this is a little bit too crazy for me. So we pulled back. We came back a little bit more.
Although we still saw him a little bit in the John Cleese.
We did, reading the books.
We actually...
we drew that from the books.
Thought of John Cleese. We tried to get John Cleese.
He wasn't interested at the time.
Yeah, at that time he was...
But in the books, he is a manic guy, and that's what really, even the Cumberbatch version takes back. And the Downey version, too, sort of that he was sort of manic, and he had very low lows and very high highs, and it seemed very ripe for. And I felt that the Basil Rathbone version had kind of softened it a little bit. I love Basil Rathbone, but it was a little bit too middle of the road.
Rathbone movies, and those kind of became the definitive in a way. But
and they're not, Nigel Bruce being
but the
kind of an idiot,
not quite as extreme. I mean, I think that Conan Doyle's Sherlock was just a more...
I still love the stories.
Dynamic character.
Rich and fun.
And then the final question, what is it about Sherlock Holmes that you like?
Well, it's a good question. The world was certainly a part of it, and that certainly relates to Disney now. Is that whole world of Victorian England just seemed... as a kid in Iowa, I don't know, as a kid, but there was just something so evocative and compelling about that world. And I'd never been... I mean, actually, when we did... Great Mouse, we did not, as I say, get to visit London. And I never ever made it to London until years after that. Around the time of Aladdin, I think was the first time I ever was in London. But also the characters, I think, and the mysteries. They were just, it was just it all.
And there's an element of caricature in the stories in a way. They're, kind of extreme visual element. And they were very visual stories, I think, so for animation.
Larger than life, in a sense.
Yeah, larger than life. Yeah, he was a bigger than life, and one of the great characters in Western fiction, I think, really, and even Watson, his counterpoint in the thing. Just they still,
definitely there were
stories.
aspects of his character that would not be considered likable just in a sort of natural way. That was somehow very appealing. That it was a thing to put across a very flawed character in a way, but still a very appealing character.
Yeah, intriguing.
Fascinating. How great to hear, those people who are so intimately connected with the work. I had no idea.
I know. And is it any surprise that the Conan Doyle estate was pleased to be included in this, as it was going to be a commercial success?
Yes. Yes, well, there you are.
Well, that theme means it's time for everyone's favorite Sherlock Holmes quiz program. That's right, it's time for the canonical couplet. We give you 2 lines of poetry and ask you. That's right, listening right now, you, to stress those little grecelles, as Hercule Poirot calls them, and determine which Sherlock Holmes story from the original 60 stories we are talking about. Now, the last time we were around here, we gave you this clue. The oldest inspector and the very youngest constable would shake Holmes's hand for finding those responsible. Okay, Bert, I'm asking you to stress your little gray cells. What can you come up with this time?
Oh, it's a classic case. It's the one where Holmes investigates the disappearance of a star Cambridge rugby player. Who's also a vegan environmental naturalist. It's the case Watson called the missing tree hugger.
Good Lord. Yeah. It was so bad even the foghorn was delayed. Wow. No, I'm going to have to call a foul on this one.
Oh, no.
But the good news is our friend Eric Deckers came to the rescue once again. Maravilloso! I've solved it. That's Portuguese, by the way. It's the story of how Sherlock Holmes befriended a young and awkward high school student and helped solve the mystery of who was smashing French tetherball trophies around town. It's the story Watson called The Adventure of the Napoleon Dynamites. Wait, that's wrong, Eric writes. I need to quit eating gummies before bed. This is the adventure of the 6 Napoleons. Yes, that is correct, Eric. And the good news is a lot of other people knew that as well. So we are going to bring out the big prize wheel and give it a spin. Goes around and slowly stops on number 31. Lucky 31. And that looks like it is Chris Chan. Hey, Chris. Congratulations. Chris is always the first one to submit answers to our canonical couplets. We can always count on Chris. Glad to hear you're in the winner's circle again, Chris. We will have a copy of On the Shoulders of Giants for you. No, we won't. That's for the upcoming one. We will have something from the BSI weekend for you. Ha-ha. How do you like that? Now, if you answer this next clue correctly and we choose your name at random, then you will get a copy of On the Shoulders of Giants. So get yourselves ready for it now. You arouse my curiosity, Watson said, at the enigmatic message which left an old man dead. If you know the answer to this episode's canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If we choose your name from all of the correct answers, you'll win. Good luck. Okay. Wow. Can't believe we've done it again. And look, folks, if you would like to use that email address, comment at ihearofsherlock.com for any other purpose, well, for correspondence, but don't sign us up for some stupid newsletter or something. But if you'd like to be in touch and let us know what you think of the show, suggestions, questions, whatever you have, please send it our way. We're always delighted to hear from you. And we should also mention that if you can't get enough of these two voices and you'd like to hear us talk about the Sherlock Holmes stories, the proper place to do that is on our other podcast, Trifles. That gets out once a week. We talk about trifling issues and Sherlockian scholarship about things that happened in the stories. So if you are dying to know more about the stories rather than about the Sherlockian culture, that is the place to go. Well, Bert, what do you have to say for yourself?
Exactly. Yes, I think you've summed that up pretty well, and I have a lot of things I'd like to add, but time is short, and so is my attention span. Hey, are you going to eat that donut?
Who are you? Squirrel?
What? Squirrel.
Oh, I have some beignets that require my attention now.
Oh, I always rub beignets on my wounds when I need a little heat. That's interesting. You should do that.
Well, folks, this is the completely sugared up Scott Monty.
And I'm the completely irrational Bert Wolder.
Always.
Always.
And together we say, the games of foot.
The games of foot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.